What's up? In this video, I'm just going to go over 10 brief seinen manga recommendations. I'm trying not to do ones that people already know. Like, I'm not going to be saying Berserk and Vagabond and stuff like that, kind of everybody knows. I'm going to try to do series that at least half of the people in this video probably haven't read. Um, I'm also just going to freehand it. I don't really have like a script. I'm just talking. If I say a lot or like some other shit, you just gotta bear with me. Like, it is how it is. Um, yeah. Uh, so I'll just hop right into it. So the first manga I'm gonna go over is Suicide Island by Koji Mori. Um, this is a seinen manga that is decent length. Probably, I think it was like 16 volumes. That is essentially about a group of teenagers, young adults, that are suicidal, and in this other world, Japan, um, they take suicidal kids that keep going in and out of hospitals and just straight up send them to an island because they're like, yeah, we don't want to take care of these people anymore. They're just not worth like the hospital cost and everything. So they send a bunch of people there, and pretty much what ends up happening is all these suicidal people now kind of have a reason for living because they're on some abandoned island and they don't really have everything handed to them. They have to get it for themselves. So you see all different groups' reactions to this. Some of them form bands and pretty much just team up to harass people and pillage and rape and all this kind of stuff. And then there's the good people that stick together and try to protect and care for the people that they end up getting attractions for. Um, and you see these two different sides clash. The main character has his own set of morals and everything that you end up watching, and it has a kind of philosophical and spiritual sense to it, where the main character goes off on his own for a little while and kind of just debates life and everything on the island, and it's just really enjoyable overall. Um, it was probably one of my favorite reads, just um, like entertainment wise. I read the entire thing in a couple days, and yeah, it was just great. So, the Suicide Island. So the next one is Pluto by Naoki Urasawa. Um, Probably a fair bit of people have already read Pluto, but I find that a lot of Urasawa fans have only read Monster and 20th Century Boys, which may very well be two of the best ones, but I think Pluto is like sorely overlooked. This may be my favorite, right next to Monster. Um, so essentially, Pluto is a story written by Urasawa, but it's a retelling of the Astro Boy story that was written by Osamu Tezuka, many, many decades prior. And in my opinion, it has the perfect length for Urasawa. Some of his works, like 20th Century Boys, I think are maybe a touch bit too long. And after you read them, you end up forgetting a lot of details, kind of because of how long they are and just his style of storytelling. That's no dish on 20th Century Boys because that's another of my favorite series, and it's great. But I think Pluto's 8 volumes is just a perfect length for an Arasawa story. It's like you could retain all of the information, you remember the entire thing, and it's just great. Like I like the story more than um, a few of his other works, definitely. Essentially, it's in a world where robots are in the mainstream. There's a lot of robots around, and it's coming right out of kind of like a world war where the entire world was kind of hurt by just a bunch of robots like fucking each other up. And there's 7 great robots in the world that come from different regions. And all of a sudden, these great robots start getting targeted, and they don't know what from, but they're getting like destroyed, and it becomes a big mystery. Who is doing this? Why they're doing it? And yeah, the characters are brilliant. The designs are awesome. The main character is super super likable. All of them are in that matter. The villain is great. Um, just um, a great story that has a great length and is kind of just perfect. I definitely recommend it if you like Urasawa works, and psychological works in general. So the next one is Inuyashiki by Hiroya Oku, who's the guy that made Gantz. and it's really similar to Gantz in that it is like another series that you literally read in like a day because it's just that fun. Um, so I'll give you a quick little overview. So it opens up with an old dude. The main character is like some old man, and his life kind of sucks. Like his kids and his wife don't really treat him like well. Like he's a work slave, and his kids don't really care about him. Like they're just like, yeah, whatever, dad, and they just go on. Um, and his wife also just doesn't really care. And then he gets cancer like in the first chapter, and you're just like, wow, this guy's life sucks. Like, and he thinks the same thing. He's like, why am I even alive? And he's just upset. And so in the middle of the night, he sneaks off and he goes to a park and he's just walking the dog, and all of a sudden, a spaceship crashes into him and he dies. Uh, but then he doesn't, because he wakes up and he's like a machine, like he's a robot. And I know you're gonna be like, "What? Like, what are you talking about?" But trust me, like this is crazy. Like it's so good, dude. So, um, so he's a robot, but also in that exact same robot crash, there happened to be a teenage guy next to him, and he also becomes a robot. And these two characters who don't know each other's existences are both robots, and you see them do things that they pretty much want to do because they're invincible now and could kind of do whatever they want. So you're like, you just watch them do what they want to do with being a robot. The main character, the old man, is an extremely good person and decides to be like a superhero and like kind of save the day for a bunch of people. Like the robot shit is like actually overpowered. Like he could literally go up to people that have cancer and just put his hand on them and they get healed. So he ends up doing shit like that. And then the kid is just like he's just a psycho. Like he is absolutely insane. The only way he could feel human after becoming a robot is by committing a calamity. So he just like straight up walks into people's houses and just murders them. And yeah, it's bizarre, but it's so good. Like you read the entire series in like 2 seconds. It also has an anime that's really good that I would recommend watching after you read it. The opening is great. Uh, yeah, it may have sounded like I just like spoiled a lot, but that's literally all of that happens within the first like 2 chapters. Like it, yeah, a lot happens, but it's just great, man. Like it is so fun to read. Um, Gantz was in general for me too. If you're a fan of Gantz, then just read this, no questions asked. Like if you've read Gantz, just don't even ask any questions, just read it. Um, yeah, it's really fun. It's really cool. The characters are unexpectedly really deep and amazing, and yeah, just read Inuyashiki. So next we have Bokutachi. The full title is Bokutachi Ga Yarimashita, but you just call it Bokutachi. So this is another like guilty pleasure series, I guess you would call it. Um, Essentially, it's about a group of four guys that are in high school, and they just joke around a lot. They're just um, pranksters, kind of, and they just do things for fun. And one day they decide to do a prank that just kind of goes horribly wrong and ends up like killing people. And you would imagine that is quite the shock, and it is for them. And they take it even bigger uh, of a deal. They decide to go on the lam, and they're just like, you know what? Like our lives are over from this, so let's just run away and let's just do whatever we want. And that's what they do. So the four of them go off on their own. They do pretty much everything that you would expect a teenage guy to do. They just find girls and like do fun things and like steal and just shit like that. And it's extremely enjoyable to watch. You read this entire series in like a day. Um, yeah, it's very etchy, um, very sexual, but just edgy overall. I'd probably say, but it's great. It's really fun to watch. Um, yeah, there's not much more to say. I mean, the plot is great actually. Like, you actually end up liking it a lot, and it gets dark in some points. The main character is relatively relatable. Like the stuff that he wants to do, you would also imagine yourself wanting to do. Uh, yeah, it's a really fun series that you would read very quickly and is very what's the word? I guess I don't want to say erotic, although it kind of is, but just interesting. I'll leave it at that. If you want a quick little series to read that's just going to be overall fun, definitely recommend this. So the next series I'm going to recommend is Homunculus. Um, so this series is probably the most serious one that I'm going to recommend. The one that um, is the most deep and uh, just like kind of depressing, but in a good way. So Homunculus is pretty much about a guy who is like homeless, and he's just living life kind of simple, not very enjoyable as you would imagine from being homeless. But he doesn't exactly hate life. He just goes about his day and does whatever he wants. He gets approached by some random dude that's like, "Hey, like I have an experiment. I'm a scientist, and if you let me do it on you, then I'll give you money." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm homeless, so like I'll take it." So the dude has an idea that if you drill a hole into somebody's head, they'll kind of receive like a third eye, like an Indian third eye, and you'll be able to see the world in a new light. So he does it to the main character. He literally puts he drills a hole in his head, and nothing really changes at first. And the main character is just like, "Oh, all right, I got free money. I mean, my head hurts a little bit, but it'll heal back, I guess." Um, until he realizes that when he covers his right eye, he sees things called homunculi, which are pretty much illusions that show him uh, manifestations of people's psyche. Which that sounds wild, and it is wild. It's pretty crazy. Like he'll see someone's metaphorical self. So, for example, he could see a girl that's like walking down the street, and he covers his right eye, and all of a sudden she just looks like she's made out of water, like she's glass, and she has water inside of her, and there's like a little hole that's leaking, and he kind of sits there and he's like, "Well, what is this?" And when you think about it, you start to piece it together. Like she's very fragile, like glass, and somebody hurt her recently, so there's a hole in her, and the water's leaking out. Like she's expressing her emotions. So it is extremely deep like that. It is really cool. Um, Overall, just like super super dark and almost like horror. It's like almost horrific. Um, but overall, like if you're into these kind of series, which I wouldn't exactly say are as quote unquote enjoyable as other series I've mentioned, but you would get more out of it. It's kind of like an Urasawa series or something where when you finish it, you're like, wow, that whole ride was like nuts. Like it was like awesome. And yeah, it's just a cool series that if you're into those kind of series, uh, like Urasawa series or anything psychological like that, like The Climber, then I would give this a try. Great series. So for the next one, I'm just gonna go over multiple series at once because I kind of view them the same. This is all of the works by Oshimi Shuzo. Um, yeah, so there's The Flowers of Evil, Inside Mari, Happiness, and Blood on the Tracks. So those are like the four main ones that I have read. Um, these series are just really, really, really enjoyable and quick to read overall. They all have similar themes where he really enjoys writing dark stories that are extremely psychological, and they're just fun to read. Um, the Flowers of Evil, I'd probably say, is the most famous of the four, um, and that is a really dark psychological series. Pretty much all of them are. Blood on the Tracks is also. Happiness is about vampires. Inside Mari is about a guy that becomes a girl. They sound weird, but I would definitely give them a try. I'd probably try the Flowers of Evil first. But all four of them are really enjoyable. If you end up reading any of the four and enjoy any of them, then I would uh, recommend just reading them all because they're quick, and his writing style just has few words, a lot of images. It is quick, pretty much just as quick as it can get. Really nice, crisp art style. Yeah, I'll briefly run through each of the four plots just so that you could decide which one you would want to read first. But Happiness is about vampires. It's some random vampire girl bites the main character, and he becomes a vampire, and he kind of just has to deal with that. Uh, Blood on the Tracks is kind of like a horror manga where the main character's mom is extremely overprotective to the point where she would like murder for him, and it gets really dark and kind of scary. Inside Mari is kind of a guilty pleasure manga where the main character becomes a girl and, just has to deal with that. Not just any girl, too. It's like a girl that he kind of idolizes. And then The Flowers of Evil is probably the most complicated and poetic one. It's probably the best one of the four, too. The main character kind of gets bullied by another girl in his class. They're in like fifth grade or something. And she's kind of a freak, but he ends up liking her. And she kind of morphs his psychology to the point where he kind of goes nuts, kind of like she is. And watching it happen is extremely uh, interesting. That's, I guess, the best way I could put it. Um, yeah, he's just a great author overall, and I would definitely give one of these four series a try because if you like it, then you have three other series to read, and more is better. So the next one is Dorohedoro. This is one of my more recent reads, but it's actually one of my more favorite. This series is just great overall. If you're a fan of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, right off the bat, I would just try this series. Essentially, it's in a world where magic is a thing, and there's two different like worlds. There's the sorcerer's world and the whole. The sorcerer's world is the normal world where everybody just has magic. They walk around, just do things. There's cities. It's a decent, nice overall world. And then there's the whole, which to get there you have to open up a magic door. It's kind of like Monsters Inc., where like a random door just opens up and you're just there. And in this world, it's pretty much just like the ghetto times 30. It's like just run down. People just beat each other up. And in this world, there's the main character. He has a lizard head, and he's trying to figure out who made his head into a lizard with his best friends. They just run around and try to find magic users and find out who did it. Um, it's bizarre as hell. It has a ginormous main cast that is about like 15 people that you like every single one of them, the guys, the women. Their designs are great. The art is great. It's gritty. It's dark. It's a mystery series. It's so cool. For many different ways. It has an anime. Um, yeah, the people's designs, the plot lines, it all makes sense. Even though it's bizarre, it all makes sense, and it's just perfect. It's a really really enjoyable read. Fighting. Um, if you're just a fan of seinen manga in general, I would definitely give it a try, especially if you like JoJo's. And yeah, I mean, there's not much more I could say. It's just big cast, big setting, great character designs, great art. It's overall just great. Highly recommend. So the next series is Holyland by Koji Mori. It's the same author as Suicide Island. This is a fighting manga and pretty much the pinnacle of all fighting manga. It is also dark and psychological. It gets into the mindset of a lot of characters, specifically the main character, and it is extremely enjoyable. Great, great read. It opens up with the streets of Japan, where pretty much there's a bunch of punks around that think they're the strongest because they're like specials in certain fighting ways. Like, there's a wrestling dude and a judo dude, and they all think they're the strongest, so they're fighting each other. And all of a sudden, they hear rumors of somebody called the Thug Hunter, who they don't know who he is, but he's beating up a bunch of thugs that think they're like, hot shit. And no, and it's just a mystery. It ends up being some wimpy kid that literally is so scared for his life that he like is forced to fight back because he looks so wimpy that everybody picks on him. So one day he's just like, you know what, fuck it, like I'm just gonna get strong. He trains and he starts being able to beat people up. Um, then he gets humbled and he has to go through a process where he learns all these different fighting styles. And when he starts putting them all together, karate, judo, and all this stuff, all these styles that he learns from previous opponents and friends and everything, uh, it becomes some really, really intense, cool, gritty fighting. And these fights are extremely enjoyable to watch. They have some psychological undertones. There's some like drug use and just a good art too, by the way. It just overall just a really great read about a good main character. It has a great, great main character with a good ending, decent length. Overall, if you were looking for a fighting series or maybe like a dark series, like a main character that you could really care for, somebody that like you'll feel for, I would definitely recommend this series to you. It's great. So my next one is Kaiji by Fukumoto, or Nobuyuki Fukumoto is his full name. And I'm kind of also recommending all of his series. He has like 7 main series that I would also recommend. It's kind of like Oshimi Shuzo, where once you kind of read one, you end up wanting to read them all because you just get sucked into his world of writing. Kaiji is one of my favorite series ever. It has a great anime that I would also recommend watching to get into it. But um, essentially, it's arranged in parts like JoJo's, except it doesn't really change characters. It just changes kind of ideas. It's about Kaiji, who is a gambling addict, and it's a gambling series, but it kind of takes away the chance of gambling and makes it more strategic and smart, and it becomes like a giant puzzle, and it's extremely fascinating to read. It's really fun. His art style may look discouraging at first, but trust me, it's the secret sauce of all of his series. It's literally what makes them good. uh, his all of his series are extremely focused on about like psychological, like people's psyches, and the art style conveys it like flawlessly. Like you see their emotions through their face like every single time. When they're like angry, you see them angry. When they're upset, you see them upset. When they're like really scared, they look terrified. The art style lends itself to his writing style pretty much as perfectly as an art style could help a series. Out of any series that has like a quote unquote strange art style, I would say that this does it the best. Um, and that goes for all of his series like Kurosawa and Ten. There's some mahjong series that he writes that are phenomenal. Akagi is one of my favorite series. But yeah, it's pretty much all of his series. I would recommend reading Kaiji first because it's kind of like an introduction. And yeah, it's the characters are great. The games, first of all, are the most fun thing to read maybe ever. Like it ranges from like it's something like Uno to like um some crazy messed up games that he creates. He pretty much puts a twist on like a lot of classic games like rock paper scissors and makes them really interesting and fascinating to read. Um, and yeah, overall, it's just he's just a phenomenal writer that knows like what's interesting to read, and and it's great. Once you read one, like I said, you'll get sucked in, and I really recommend that you try this. Out of anything here, maybe you could try the anime first, and then you could go into the manga if you like it, because the anime's great too. But yeah, I mean, Kaiji's just man, it just never fails. It's just so good. It's decently long, which is good because you have a lot of content, and yeah, there's nothing much more I could say. Just give it a try, and I pretty much could assure you that you'll like it. So the next manga is going to be Kingdom, and this is the final one. I held it for last because this is the one that I probably feel the most passionate about. This is definitely my favorite on the list. I would put Kingdom in the leagues with seinen greats and manga greats in general, like Vagabond, Berserk, Vinland Saga, all those series that everybody loves. Um, but honestly, like this may be my favorite out of them all. Like the Kingdom is just it's so good, man. It's in a league of its own. It it is the only manga that does what it does, and it does it flawlessly on top of that. It has 60 volumes, which may sound like a turn off, but it is the biggest turn on possible because when you start reading it, you're like, dude, thank God there's 60 volumes. Um, the art is fantastic. The story is literally as good as the stories could be. It is sick. The characters, there's probably over 100 that I could name off the top of my head, like that are actually memorable and cool and have their own standout feelings. Um, yeah, it's all right. So essentially, it's about Warring States China, which, if you aren't familiar with it, is when China was cut up between 7 different kingdoms, and they were all fighting to have land. Um, the main character Shin is from the state Qin, which eventually, as we know, will become China. Which is the reason why China's name is China because it came from the state of Qin. Uh, and Shin befriends the king of Qin, who has the aspiration to unite all of China. But to do that is not an easy feat because each state has their own generals and their own uh, land and everything, and their own heroes that the people hail. The series has like over 100 characters that I could name off the top of my head, like just amazing, genius great written characters, and the strength of the series comes from its world building, which is flawless. I could literally picture the entire thing in my head. It is so cool. Um, they go so many different places, and you know where it all is. It's all mapped out perfectly for you. It's awesome. All the locations that they fight in, and the strength is the wars. So this series is more or less divided by arcs that are wars, and the wars take up volumes on their own. And no other series I've ever read like uh shows wars especially as good as Kingdom. Like it is insane, man. They all have generals, and those generals have soldiers, and those soldiers have people that they control of their own. And you see this all, and you see the command, and you see just soldiers doing great things. Tragedy, characters die. There's heroes like just super generals that everybody loves. Uh, a lot of tragic moments, a lot of funny moments. Like it pretty much just does everything perfect. Uh, but especially the characters and, like I said, the wars in general. Like just the way the series is split up, it's so good, and it never gets old because these arcs are kind of split up between political arcs too, which are short but also great. Like every arc in this series is just awesome, man. The characters are so cool. There's no bullshit really. It's just like as cool as it could get. And the cherry on top is the Coalition War arc, which is literally like the greatest arc in like manga. It's like just imagine your favorite arc in a series and like amp the coolness up by 10 because the characters are sick and the setting is sick and the story behind it is sick. It's so cool, man. Um like I said, the 60 volumes may be a turnoff, but if you're at all interested in seeing a great series, one of the best series ever, uh, I would give it a try. Granted, not everybody has my opinion, but with the stuff I like stuff like JoJo's, where like it has a lot of characters, a lot of good characters, series with good settings, and especially like the old kind of feel, like stuff that Vagabond and Berserk have, like this historical kind of feeling. Kingdom, it just does it. It does it so good, man. Um, yeah, I could go on forever just saying good things about it, but you should just give it a try. Um, After the first couple arcs, you kind of just get sucked in. You read the entire thing, and I would love to talk about it with you. Um, yeah. Uh, so there's Kingdom. Um, give it a try if you're interested in seeing something that's just as good as it gets. That's all I can say. It's as good as it gets. So yeah.